So yeah, Giorno, it was a bad idea jumping in the middle of a canal filled with water against a man that is able to use ice abilities with his stand. Good job on you. But to be fair, though, when you really take a moment to think about the canal, it's salt water. And I don't know how many of you are very aware of salt water and what it can do. Salt water is filled with salt. Obviously, it's in the name. But think about what they use on the roads. When snowstorms are coming in, when, ice is about to cover the road, usually you have salt trucks come in, they pour salt all over the road, and it causes where ice can't freeze. Now, it doesn't always stop it, because it just depends on temperature, how much snow, ice, etc., etc., but most of the time, it can combat it. And in this case, salt water is something that really can't freeze that well. It takes extreme cold, like extremely extreme cold, like is really cold to be able to freeze salt water. And so Giorno jumping into the canal with the car, it does make sense because it's salt water and it is good against ice. But it is still ridiculous that he was able to freeze the salt water. So, you know what? I will let Giorno's, failed plan slide for the time being, just because, it is crazy strong to be able to do that. If White Album wasn't so strong, it would have been very easy for Giorno and Mista to actually finish off, Ghiaccio. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But okay, anyways, Ghiaccio's death is probably one of the single most brutal deaths we have ever seen for a villain, or at the very least for a lesser villain. Let's not talk about what happened to Cars in part 2. That was, honestly, I in a lot of ways, I feel bad for Cars. I think we all do. If you've watched JoJo and you've seen that and you think about it, Cars really did not deserve that endless suffering that happened to him. But, okay. Anyways, Ghiaccio, he died in a brutal way. Probably the most brutal death so far of Part 5, and honestly, just thinking about the image makes me just, curl up, because I'm normally okay with violence, gore, etc., etc., but when it comes to, let's say, the umbrella scene in Another, if you've ever watched Another, and you remember the umbrella scene, then you know what I'm talking about. Scenes like that really just get me whoa, freaking out and stuff, because it's so real. Something like that could happen. Something with a sharp point, let's say you're falling down some stairs, and a sharp point just like this right up at you, and you fall down, it's terrifying. And so seeing what happened to Ghiaccio and how he slowly got his neck impaled, that, what an end. What an end to the man. It wasn't a quick death either. The man slowly died. He got impaled, halfway, froze his blood, and then you have it to where Giorno continuously pushes him into it with using his stand. That's brutal. And, when you think about all of the lesser villains so far of this arc, or Part 5, they've all died. They've all died in such a brutal way that you're like, man, is this really the same JoJo, like Part 4 JoJo? Even Part 3, even though there was some brutal stuff that happened, it wasn't to the extreme that Part 5 is. And it really just shows at that time, when I think Part 5 was in Weekly Shonen Jump at the time, it just shows that Weekly Shonen Jump was a very different place in the past. Because nowadays, there's just no way that Weekly Shonen Jump would have allowed stuff like this in today's manga. They're pretty brutal. There can still be some brutal manga that comes out, but not to what extent happened in this episode. And I give David Productions credit for really not fully, censoring, full-on censoring the episode or that scene. I am impressed with that, so thank you so much, David Productions. Which, by the way, praising David Productions, they added the second half of Mista's backstory in this episode, and it got many in, a discussion okay, so why didn't they show the full extent to Mista's backstory a few episodes back? And now we got the reasoning. We had the rest of Mista's backstory finally revealed to anime-onlys and all that in the anime of Part 5, and seeing what led to Mista being like he is, his resolve to being a part of Bruno's crew. And I think the way David Productions added in like that, using the half that we haven't seen, was probably a really good touch by them. It extended upon what made this, episode or this part in the manga so good, but also it made just, I think, this episode better. David Productions really does love this series. I've said it so much, but they really are a company that takes pride in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I'm just so glad a studio that really does care about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure got this series, because if it isn't David Productions, honestly, I don't think I'd ever accept another JoJo anime from any other company. That's just how good of work they do, and that's not even getting into the voice acting. So, Mista, actually, I want to talk about him. Mista, he is such an unlucky man. Yes, we know he believes in, the number 4 where, it's cursed or whatever, but he's just so unlucky. Every time he is in a fight, he always technically hits himself with his own bullets. I mean, think about it. Every single fight since the introduction of his character, and every time he gets in a fight, he's always hitting himself with his own bullets from his own gun. And you're like, yo, dude, you need to just stop using your gun. Just throw that away. Because you are just not meant to hold one. You're always getting hit. And I think someone's probably done the math out there. If anyone knows the math or whatever has been done out there, can anyone tell me how many shots, Mista's been hit by with his own gun in comparison to actually hitting his opponents? If anyone actually has the math, please tell me in the comments below. I am very curious, because just seeing how much damage he has taken in this episode alone is unnerving. The man had bullet holes all in him. I'm just surprised that he didn't kill over and die like that. Thankfully, he had someone like Giorno around to keep him alive. I mean, if Giorno wasn't there, Mista was done. There was no way he was getting back up ever again. Which, by the way, Giorno as a character, I like what Mista said about him. Mista's like, the more and more I hang out with Giorno, he's such an enigma. He's a mystery. Why do I feel like he's more of a leader than Bruno? And you see the image of Bruno to the side on the left, and then you see Giorno pop up on the right while Mista's thinking about them. He's like, why does Giorno feel like more of a leader? And it is interesting, because Giorno is a newbie to the crew. He's a, newbie to this organization, but every time he gets into a fight with the rest of the members, he usually knows what to do. He knows what needs to be done, he's able to analyze it and do the right thing. And that right there, when Mista says that, you're like, yeah, Giorno's kind of like a guy behind the scenes, pulling the strings, but really not getting hands-on that much until he is actually needed. Which I think is a really interesting way to do Part 5 JoJo, because, think about it, normally you have your Joestar, your main character of a part, frontline center, getting into a lot of fights. And I think many can appreciate that Part 5 is kind of taking a step back from that. We've had a lot of our characters have their own centralized fights. Mista and all of them have their own fights, and they get to shine. And Giorno really hasn't had many fights to himself. He hasn't gotten that much time. But it doesn't mean that he's an underdeveloped character, or he sucks, or, he's not interesting. It's just, he's someone that kind of really fits the role of a leader behind the scenes, like a leader of Bruno himself. Even though Bruno is technically the leader, it's kind of like Giorno is the one that's calling the shots, in a way. But, he's not meaning to. It's like subconsciously he's doing it. So, there was a nice little comparison this episode for that. Now, anyways, White Album, The Stand. It's, in terms of every stand we've seen, I said my piece last week. It doesn't seem as broken as, like a Death Aura and all that, but it's still powerful, because the man was freezing salt water. He was freezing things so quickly that your literal limbs would fall off without you even realizing it. It was cold, and White Album is probably one of the scariest stands, I think, of Part 5. It's not something to really look down upon and think it's weak. Definitely, if he wasn't taken out in this episode, it would have been a really big problem for Bruno and everyone else, because they had him right where they needed, because he was focusing on the disc that needed to be grabbed, and they had him to where they could take him down because they were figuring out him, and he was kind of dropping his guard. He wasn't really expecting, someone like Giorno with his abilities to be like they are. He was just still trying to analyze and figure out how they work. So they got the upper hand. If he would have gotten away, and even if Giorno and Mista got out alive, the man would have known how the stand worked from Giorno, and they wouldn't have been able to do what they did in this episode. So I think it really just comes down to the lack of info on both sides. If it wasn't for White Album, the user of White Album not knowing everything, then I think this would have ended very differently. So yeah, one last thing to talk about. Let's talk about that final scene, the very, very yaoi orientated scene. Now, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is not brand new to the yaoi scene. It's something you see quite often. I mean, when you look at JoJo Bizarre Adventure, it's very flamboyant in a way. Like, the characters just are so pizzazzy. They can be very shoujo-like. I mean, look at part 4, Josuke, how he looked. Look at their outfits, for crying out loud. They have very unique and colorful designs, and this is something that we even saw in part 3. In part 3, there was a whole scene with Abadol and, Joseph, yeah, when they were kind of stuck together, and it was a very weird way they were stuck together, and I remember it was just an entire episode focused on it, which was freaking hilarious. So this isn't something entirely new to the story, but it's hilarious. At the end of the episode, you see just like Narancia, he's just looking at Giorno and Mista while they're on a bench, and it looks so wrong. Like, just look at the image. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna go any further, but like, yo, chill, Araki. Like, you need to chill. But okay, I think that's pretty much about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below, because for some reason, even if you click the subscribe button, you don't always get notified. So if you want to get notified, hit that bell icon. And with that, I love you guys. Chibi out.